Hi, this is Dr. Osesa Oliver with another episode of the Way to College podcast. I often share that the podcast has been a blessing. It's allowed me to connect with folks that have been an important part of my own educational journey, professional journey. Um, but then one of the added benefits is that it's allowed me to connect with other folks that weren't necessarily a part of my network, but have become part of this extended network. And today is another one of those opportunities. Um, and so before we get into it, what I want to do is I want to allow my guest to introduce himself. So Noah, would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners out there?
My name is Dr. Noah Rodriguez, and I'm a gynecologic oncologist at Kaiser Permanente.
Noah, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And Noah, I ask all of my guests the same question at the beginning, and it is, if you had to identify a starting point for your own educational journey, what would that starting point be?
Yeah, I think it started definitely when I was young. I think the earliest memory that I have, as far as being encouraged to pursue an education, was with my dad. My dad is an immigrant from the state of Sinaloa, Mexico, and he came to this country when he was about 20 years old. As many immigrants do, just in search of a better opportunity than the one that they were born into. And I specifically remember him pulling me aside after he came back from work. And it was one of these things where we grew up mainly with my mom because my dad was busy working either very, very long hours or working two jobs. And the words that he gave me were essentially boiled down to basically, number one, you're going to work hard in life. No matter what you choose to do, it requires hard work. Make sure you make a good choice because of that. Stay in school, do well in school. You'll get more opportunities than I have. You'll be able to work hard, but in an environment that is climate controlled and air conditioned. It was actually, you know what? It was actually during a summer day. So we lived in the Ramona Gardens housing projects with, basically these concrete cinder block structures for homes or apartments, and there's no air conditioning. And the summertime in inner city LA, I mean, if it's hot outside, it's even hotter inside. And so that's where I remember that you get to work hard, at least in an air conditioned type of setting. So that's the earliest that I have in terms of just someone, and it was my dad in this case, using that example of just life requires hard work, make good decisions, stay in school, do well in school, and that opens up the opportunities for what type of work you'll be able to do.
I love that story. Thank you for sharing that. And I love that story because of a number of things. So I don't know what number interview this is. No, this is like 166 or something like that. But it's funny because it's a story that I think is consistent with a lot of my guests. A lot of my guests talk about that moment when one of their parents encouraged them to stay in school because work opportunities and just not so that they wouldn't have to experience or do maybe the same kind of work or have more opportunities. But I love you talk about the climate control. I had a couple of guests talk about how, in their own story, how their parents and even just among their families, the aspiration to work indoors, the aspiration to work in like a with AC, um, and how I think we take it for granted today, but for a lot of our folks, right, that was so important, and it was an opportunity that very few of them had at the time. Noah, let me ask you, what is it that your father did?
My father grew up as a farmer, and still many of his family. As a matter of fact, I just came back from visiting family in Sinaloa, so most of his family is still in the area where they grew up. and they're a farming community. So it's very much outdoors. He grew up as a farmer, cultivating, tomatoes and onions, chilies and beans and garbanzo beans. And so a whole different range of different products. And then here in the United States, where he's been for over 40 years now, he serves as a tire recapper. So he basically retreads the big tires, semi-truck tires, tires used for the garbage collecting types of trucks. So he puts treads on that tire. He's been doing that for over 40 years now and continues
Wow.
to do that. Continues to do, I tell him to retire, but he's still continuing to do that same work.
Noah, so your father has this moment with you, trying to teach you a lesson and encourage you to stay in school. What were your own experiences like in school?
Yeah, in school, it was varied because there was certainly the influences that I was observing. So lots of just a lot of playing around, a lot of distraction. Some of them were my friends, and just kind of distracting in class and things like that. And my own experience, though, I think was what was very different because of that conversation that my dad had. It was just kind of like staying focused, do well in school, and I remember that just the earliest memories that I have of, the teacher giving me a little star on whatever project I did. I mean, it really like made me feel good. And who doesn't like to feel good, And so it
Yeah,
was just kind of that one of those things where I'm like, this is a good feeling. And
yeah.
I want to continue getting more stars on my project, getting more stars behind my name. And it was just this cycle. It felt good to do that. And so it made me want to continue to do that.
Was there ever any, because I think about the students that I work with today, and a lot of them, I'll teach part-time at the local university. And so my students are first year students, and they come in with very sort of concrete ideas about the work that they're supposed to do, and largely influenced by their parents or those outside in factors, kind of social media, right? Now we had the benefit, I think, of not growing up with social media, so we didn't have to deal with that pressure. But was there ever any pressure from anyone or anything on you to say, this is what you should do, this is the path you should follow?
I don't know that I would necessarily consider it a pressure that I felt. Certainly, there were influences, and growing up in the projects. I mean, it's just there's a lot of negative influences, and there's lack of opportunity too. And so you only know what you're presented with, particularly when we grew up, when there wasn't really all that available access to your experience, to the world beyond your own experiences. The world exists as it's laid out right in front of you, and it's a very limited view. And so there you're just looking at, do I work in the grocery store? Do I go the fast food route? Do I go the route of my parents? Or do I do the quick money route and join the gangs and try to, make a quick buck? So those were sort of the opportunities that were laid out, and not necessarily, I wouldn't describe it as feeling a pressure, but certainly an observation that I saw, and just trusting my dad's words and just saying, look, those opportunities, there's many, many more. As a matter of fact, he told me, you stay in school, you could be a lawyer, you could be a teacher, you could even be a doctor. So those were the ones that, my father's voice, and then it was also bolstered and supported by my mom's too. They were just sort of tag teaming and just saying, look, you and your brothers, you have an opportunity here to do better than what your father and I were able to do. So I think those are the realities, kind of what is in the home and the influences in the home, and certainly what you're seeing and what's around you.
Thank you. And you mentioned earlier about, your school experiences and how good it felt, right? When the teacher acknowledged You did good work getting the star. And I absolutely agree. I think, I enjoyed that. I know and I wanted more of that. But you talk about, you're describing your community to us here, and you're talking about what you're seeing, but then also the messaging that you're getting from your parents. By the time you enter high school, what are the opportunities that are presented to you there? Because I've had guests that talked about tracking and being tracked towards particular paths, but then having somebody that maybe looked out for them, or saw potential in them and sort of guided them away from that and into a different path. What were the opportunities that were presented to you in school, and you, as someone who wanted to continue to invest in school, did you find the support that you needed at the school level?
I was um I was tracked, and I was tracked in a way that was very advantageous to me. So I was tracked in the gifted track, and so all the resources were put within that cohort of students, students who were, who definitely were apart from the majority, particularly in the neighborhoods where we were going to school. And so, the support to just say, hey, you're going to stay in school, you're going to go to college. I mean, that was in my mind already from an early age. And so it was pretty easy for teachers to just speak to that cohort, knowing that, hey, sixth period is the group of tracked kids that are labeled as gifted that are going to pursue a higher education. And so they spoke to us in that way. Other career opportunities, though, as I was reflecting on my high school experience, my first job, I worked in McDonald's, and I was a server. And one of the other things that my dad really instilled in us was, whatever job you do, you just make sure that you do it to the best of your abilities. Just knock it out the park. Be the best person who, drops fries, be the best person who serves that burger, or whatever it may be, right? You just bring your A game wherever you go. And, 6 months into the job, there was an opportunity to become an assistant manager. And I was presented with that. Now, at the age of, I was about 17 at the time, it was an opportunity to start making, what was considered real money at the time. It was about $36,000 a year, guaranteed
Wow.
salary. And so, you know, that was something that could have just kind of swayed me in one direction, just to say, look, I got an opportunity right now at this age to start making money that, I mean, it's real. It does have an opportunity there to, buy yourself material possessions and start to make that advancement in life, well beyond the $4.10 that I was making an hour at the time. But, again, it was just one of those things where it was like, that was one sort of way that I could have deviated, but I didn't. I wanted to just stay in school and really explore the other options that I had. And at that time in high school, I already had in my mind that I wanted to explore a career in medicine.
So you won well, because I think a lot of the young people, particularly if growing up sort of in the same environment that you did, seeing what you saw and sort of the opportunities presented to you, and to be able to say, I think at that time, right, $36,000, significant amount of money, possibly still, opportunity to still get out of that community and continue to grow. Yet you stayed true to your path. Here you said you wanted to pursue a career in medicine. What led you down that path?
It was it was luck, really. Going back to that conversation where my dad just kind of off the cuff, just threw out possible career choices. It was really between, of the options he threw out at the time, just in the moment at that conversation, the two career paths that I really thought about were medicine and teaching. And so I was like, well, I think I'm gonna be one or the other. And you know I wanted to just continue. Bottom line is whether it was going to be a teacher or a doctor, they both were going to require college education and then possibly beyond certifications, testing, stuff like that. And so for at least that part, the next 4 years after high school, going to university or college, that was already set for me in my mind.
Wow. At high school, in your high school, right? You said you were track, you, so you knew you wanted to do medicine, you knew you were going to go to college. Did you see the same kind of support from your teachers at your high school?
Yeah, and I often wonder because, but I did see the support of my teachers. My teachers were tremendously supportive. As a matter of fact, during my junior year, when I was starting to apply to colleges and universities, asking for letters of recommendation, they were very, very supportive in that. And junior year, as it is for most, as you're applying for college, the college application process just adds another layer of stress and another thing to do on top of an already very, very full plate. And I remember thinking that, you know what, maybe I bit off more than I can chew at this point. I was playing sports and I was working and, obviously trying to do well in school, taking AP classes, doing the whole thing. And when one of my teachers asked me, "Hey, Noah, how's the college application process going?" And he specifically asked me about whether I had completed my Stanford application, because he was very supportive of that. And I had to tell him, I'm like, you know what, that application is really long, and I don't think I'm going to end up applying. It's like 20 pages long. And, I remember specifically the look on his face of just like being a look of disappointment, which, I never got from my teachers.
Yeah,
And his words to me were, if you're being discouraged by the length of a college application, then I seriously doubt that a career in medicine is something that you want to do. And that was a challenge. And I was like,
yeah,
all right, man, you know, fine. I got it. I'm gonna go ahead and do it. And I'm so glad that I did. But and he's one of my best friends, continues to this day. We still keep in contact, gee, what, 30 years after the fact. And whether it was a Jedi mind trick that he was doing and speaking to sort of like this guy needs to be challenged at this time or what. But I'm really, really glad for his support back then, his support throughout my career, and those of many, many teachers as well, just being tremendously supportive. The teacher support I can't speak about enough. It's
yeah,
tremendously important to have other people, besides your parents are, your biggest cheerleaders, generally speaking. But when teachers come out and they say, no, you know what, you got potential, you really do. And that I'm not just saying that just to, spin words, but they really are there to support you in words and in action and just say, hey, you should look at this. Hey, have you considered A, B, or C? I heard about this opportunity that might interest you. I think that goes a very, very long way.
wow. You finished the Stanford application. When it came time to looking at your options, right? Your dad's words, I imagine, ringing true, right? You've got probably multiple college opportunities. How did you decide on where to go?
It was hard. What it came down to, I remember it essentially came down to Stanford and Yale. And I didn't at the time, I really didn't, it didn't hit me just how rare that is, how just how impactful just being in that position to make that choice was. So I didn't know how to make that choice. I didn't even know the choices. I didn't know the full scope of those choices and the full meaning of those choices. So I went to my college advisor and I was like, look, I'm narrowing it down to these two. Just because I've heard, and the reason why I narrowed it down to those two was because I heard of the name recognition, through television, mainly through TV at the time. And my college advisor was the one who was just like, wow, to to have that choice, Noah. He's like, you can go either way, but to be in that position and have that choice, that truly, truly is remarkable, and you're very, very lucky. And I was, and I didn't know it at the time. I was 17 and a half years old. I had no clue what the meaning was to be in that position. But essentially, it came down to Stanford, and it was. I remember the reason why I went to the promo weekend. They invited prospective students to come and, hang out at the campus for a weekend. And I went and saw the campus and saw that it was only an hour away from home, and I was sold.
The I imagine the transition getting to Stanford and home, Stanford and your high school. I imagine there was quite a difference there. What was that transition like for you?
It's difficult. It was difficult. There was a constant pull to come home. First of all, it was the first time I was ever away from home, and being away from my parents, my siblings. We're of course a very tight knit family, and and I wasn't there. I wasn't at home, but I wasn't at Stanford either. Physically, I was at Stanford, but mentally, I was not. Physically, I was not at home, but mentally, I was. And that really made the full transition to college life much, much more difficult. And it's something that, I didn't really appreciate at the time, but certainly now, just looking back, knowing that making that transition to college adds another layer of complexity, adds another layer of it just further challenges you. So not only do you have to deal with the academic challenges, which are at another level beyond that of the high school level, so you have to adjust to the academic challenge, but it's also making that adjustment to being in a college, to being away from home. But that is that. I mean, there's so much to unpack there because it was also, it's just a different people. I mean, in East LA is a very insular type of community because first of all, you don't have to really go anywhere beyond. You have everything you need there in that community. And so
Yeah.
you grow up, if you don't ever leave, you grow up thinking like that's the world. Because for you growing up as a kid, it is the world. You don't have to go anywhere. You go to the store, it's there. You go to buy clothes, it's there. You go, anywhere, it's all there. And so the outlook at Stanford was very, very different than that of East LA.
Noah, thank you for sort of describing it the way you did. Like I said, I've interviewed a lot of guests, a number of Stanford alums, a number of I think mutual friends, and yet nobody's described it like that. Nobody's talked about, sure, physically I'm there, mentally I'm not, maybe even emotionally I might not be there, right? But then I'm at home, not physically there, but mentally there and emotionally there. No, I throughout my interviews, I typically ask guests to maybe offer some insight. What advice would you give somebody who finds themselves in a similar situation where, home isn't too far away, it was just far enough where it allows them to grow, but at the same time, now that they are away, they're not there. They're not at on campus mentally, emotionally. They're still back at home. What advice would you give someone like that?
One, recognize it. It took me a while. It took me, it took me more than a year, and it really made me suffer academically. So number one, recognize it and address it. Your head has to be in the game. It has to be there in the environment. You got to embrace the entire college environment, college experience, full head on. So yes, emotionally, mentally, everything. You got to be present in the moment because especially at Stanford or any other college that is a quarter-based system, the quarters go by fast. And you got to hit the ground running. If your head isn't in the game and it's somewhere else, you're going to find yourself behind. So, you know, you have to make sure that you're surrounded. For me, what worked for me was being surrounded, but with friends and letting them know, and just saying, "Hey, look, I'm having a hard time being here. I miss home tremendously." And then finding out, you know what, I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
Maybe they found a different way to cope, and they coped with it a little bit better and sooner than I had. But that experience it goes well beyond one person, and surrounding yourself with friends that are going to be supportive, and number one, understand you, but number two, be supportive and just say, hey, look, what can we do? Look, we're here. We're only going to be here for 4 years, and these years we're going to make the most out of them. We're going to make the most out of this educational opportunity that is just, so lucky, so unique. And so I think that for me was the turning point, was when I recognized, hey, I'm going to need some support here. Reached out to a group of friends who became my closest friends in college. And, after that, we just made a decision to study together, to support one another. Hey, ask, hey, did you get that paper done? If not, look, I'm going to be up tonight. Unfortunately, it's going to be another all-nighter. I will join you side by side, and we're gonna crank out that paper and get it done. So, the advice I'd say, recognize it. It's not just you. It is something that happens, but just deal with it. The way that I dealt with it was just surrounding myself with a group of friends there who were very, very supportive.
I love that. Thank you. You mentioned something about that year, that first year, and you said you suffered academically. You know, I I come across a lot of young people that maybe want to pursue a career in medicine, and it feels almost as if the stakes couldn't be higher, and I've got to do really well in all of my classes, and I can't slack off. Here you are, you struggle your first year. Did at any point did doubt creep in, and did you have any second thoughts about, am I going to be able to pursue a career in medicine?
Absolutely. 100%. As a matter of fact, I mean, I was placed on academic probation, and I was given pretty much a challenge. Like, I either start performing academically, or I should perhaps consider a different institution to pursue my studies. Um, and it was the summer after my sophomore year, and my academic advisor at the time was really, essentially told me, look, I don't think a career in medicine is for you, and quite frankly, I don't think Stanford is for you. And she's the one that told me, you really got to go home this summer and think about things. It's not necessarily the trajectory. It's not necessarily kind of like the way that I would have approached it if I were an academic advisor. But nevertheless, I went home that summer really, really dejected, disappointed, just I mean, bordering on just depressed of where, I graduated as my high school valedictorian of my class. I was at the top. And all of a sudden, I found myself, rock bottom, about to be, in her words, kicked out of the university. And let alone my plans for becoming a doctor at that time, just, seeing them almost fade away in front of me. So, yeah, it was, and I shared this with my parents after I was very, very, ashamed to even say this to my parents. My parents had, put me on a pedestal and had thought the world of me. And all of a sudden I had to tell them, you know what, that was then, and this is now, unfortunately, I'm struggling. And, once I was able to have that talk with my parents just rallied around me. And they reminded me that those past academic achievements, they were real.
Yeah.
Like, they reminded me of what I was capable of. And, for whatever reason, and I told them, I was like, I miss home. I do. That's the bottom line. I just miss home. And my dad, again, was just very much like, look, you got an opportunity. You have an opportunity, and it's only a couple years. You got to make the most out of it and show yourself and show others what you're capable of. And my family is we're a very faith-based family. I mean, it was like God put you there for a reason. And took a lot of self-reflection. It took those words from my parents, those reminders of where we had come from, where I had come from. And I came back my junior year and I made the honor roll for the rest of my time at Stanford. I went ahead, I mean, I turned 180 degrees. All of a sudden, I wasn't just taking the bare minimum of classes. I was taking 20 unit loads in a quarter. And as a matter of fact, my last quarter, I took 25 units in order to allow me to graduate with the rest of my friends. So yeah, it was hard. It was hard, and there were moments of self-doubt that summer. It was self-doubt, depression. It was everything. It was just, but again, my parents rallied around me. It's those voices of support, and I was able to pull out of it and move forward.
Wow. Wow, I love that. And congratulations. I think we absolutely learn a lot about ourselves when we're faced with and find ourselves in those moments. So thank you for sharing that with us, because I imagine also that's not always easy to share, to talk about those experiences. You know, Noah, you bounce back, graduate from Stanford, and still with the idea that you're going to be a doctor, correct? What came next for you?
So I majored in religious studies at Stanford, and I had a great advisor in the Department of Religious Studies who really just supported my writing. Made himself available after for teaching hours and everything like that. Encouraged me to bring drafts. We'll work on it together. Helped me unpack some of the ideas, and was just very, very supportive. I ended up applying for a master's program in theological studies at the Divinity School at Harvard, and I got in. And so now I was at a crossroads because I was so far behind in my studies. I had focused all my energies on just trying to complete my major and graduate. And so now I was at a crossroads. Do I pursue the theological studies and go down the PhD route and the educational route, which I found to be very appealing as well? Or do I go and try to do the medicine route? The one thing that I knew that, yes, I loved education. It was the world that I knew, but there was also this pull, this dream, this just kind of like this curiosity that should I feel like I should. And
Yeah.
so Harvard was very gracious because I asked them to put my matriculation on hold. Well, I kind of figured out things. And so during that time, I ended up just completing some pre-med requirements and taking the MCAT, which is the entrance exam to medical school, and um, and I got in. And now I was faced with another decision. Harvard was waiting, and do I do the educational route, or now that I got into medical school, do I do that? And so I said, you know what? And again, it takes a lot of just like being in a quiet room by yourself, and it doesn't come, at the first session. Like this is over the course of a couple of just days of just self-reflection. And I said, you know what, I need to give this medicine thing a chance. Otherwise, I think I could be happy as a professor, but I will always question the what if and go back to that. So again, I was very, very glad with the decision that I made. So I made that decision to go to medical school.
Noah, it's fascinating. Not long before that moment, you had to make a decision between Stanford and Yale. Here you've got to make a decision between medical school and the divinity school at Harvard. I bet you never imagined that the opportunities your father talked about would present themselves in such a way, did you?
there was no way that I think I did. I mean, I'll ask my dad, but I'm sure my dad would be like, "Yeah, I knew this all along. Why do you think I said
Yeah, our
that?"
parents tend to be very confident. I think they.
That's right. Yeah, but I had no clue, and it's what I the advice that I give the any young person that I come across is, education still just opens up so many opportunities, and it really is something that has benefited me.
Wow. You decide to go to medical school. Where did you attend medical school? Oh,
Was at the Charles Drew UCLA Medical Education Program, so they're at UCLA.
so it allows you to be close to home, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Was having the experience that you had at Stanford, what was the transition like then for you to medical school?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. So medical school was a much easier transition. Um,
Really?
um, it really was because I already had learned that you got to be there. You got to be in the moment, in
Yeah.
the environment. And I was there, and I was ready to the success that I had during my last 2 years at Stanford, and I was ready to put it to the test there in medical school, and I did. And I learned at Stanford. I learned how to be more disciplined, study habits. you know uh, those are just the fundamentals that I learned, and I was able to apply it in medical school, so that the experience in medical school was night and day. I mean, I loved Stanford and everything, but it came with its own set of challenges that I had to learn from. Medical school, the academic challenge, I was already prepared to meet because I was much more disciplined at that time. My head was in the game, much more so than it was when I was in college.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's awesome. Good for you. You how long have you been a physician?
I graduated medical school in 2003. So after medical school, you do 4 years of training, but you're a doctor already. So you're just continuing to do your training there. So I finished all my training in 2011.
Wow. And how did you decide on your specialization?
Yeah, it's not so my specialty is very unique. There's less than 1,200 of us in the entire country. So it's a very small specialty within OBGYN, and the focus is to take care of women who have cancers of the female reproductive tract. So cancers like uterine cancer, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer. Um, when I made the decision to go into medical school, I was thinking about becoming a family doctor, a general practitioner. That way, focusing on mainly, your bread and butter type of medical conditions like diabetes, cholesterol, high blood pressure, conditions that affect disproportionately the Latino community. And so that's the thought that I had. But medical school, again, just exposes you to so many different areas of medicine, areas that I didn't know existed, like the area that I chose to go into. And it wasn't until that exposure that I really, again, I feel like it was I remember going through the rotation and just feeling fulfilled, feeling like I'm approaching the day with just a new sense of enthusiasm and interest, and wanted to help the patients. And making the decision to go into medical school was really falling to that area within myself of wanting to help and to meet people in the time where they need it the most. And within all the specialties of medicine, I found that those patients who were suffering from a cancer diagnosis were among those who really needed the help of of a physician the most.
You it's interesting the way you described that, and recognizing when that moment was for you, right? You talked about this fulfillment, and it's interesting. I interviewed another physician. She's an orthopedist here in Texas, but she had aspirations of becoming a neurologist, and she said it was during her rotations. And she said she had this moment where she was assisting on a surgery, and the surgeon said, put your hand here. And she said it was like a shoulder joint or something. And she said she immediately put her hand there, and she said it was like everything clicked. So at that moment, she realized, you know what, I want to do this kind of work. And so, I appreciate you talking about that fulfillment and recognizing that moment for yourself. Noah, congratulations on all of your success and and your journey. And I know your journey's not over, right? You're still continuing with your journey. But I appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences, to be so candid with us. With all of my guests, I always ask as we transition out, what's a last piece of advice you'd like to share with our listeners out there?
I would I'll share some of the things that I've learned. So, you know, pursuing an education is well worth it, number one. It's difficult, I think, now to reconcile that with the tremendous debt that's out there, and hopefully there'll be some policies in place that will make education more affordable and accessible. So yes, it is expensive, but it opens up so many opportunities. That's number one. The second thing I would say is, you know, any goal that is worth pursuing is is going to have some setbacks. And that's what I've learned. I've experienced my own setbacks, my own failures. It wasn't always, just smooth sailing for me. Um, but it was worth it. It was worth going through those moments of disappointment, of self-doubt. I don't want to go through it again. But that journey, like you had mentioned, it's a twisting road. And through those moments where there is that those setbacks, you just got to surround yourself with individuals, and it could be your parents, family, but go beyond that, friends, teachers, mentors who will support you to help bring you out of those moments where you're experiencing some self-doubt or failures even, and just continue to push forward and be determined, perseverance to get to that goal. If it's a worthwhile goal, then you got to be determined in order to get there.
I think that's wonderful advice, and yeah, and I couldn't agree anymore. Um, yeah, Noah, thank you for your time today. Thank you for sharing your story. I know your story is going to resonate with a lot of our listeners out there. In fact, in a few hours, I've got to teach class, and I know I'm already gonna start talking about, and alluding to some of the experiences that you've shared, because I think there's so much richness there, and so much to learn from your experience. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure and honor to be here. And, thank you for the work that you're doing as well. I think, our experiences, there's a lot of similarities, and they continue, they continue to, so there's folks that are coming up, in the years that they need to hear this because we were them not so long ago, right? And so these experiences that you're capturing through the podcast, they're so important to the listeners, to the younger listeners, or to anybody, because our experiences they're very similar.
Thank you, thank you. This concludes another episode of the Way to College podcast. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to all of our listeners out there. Please make sure you follow, subscribe, rate, all of that good stuff. And do me one other favor and please share the podcast with one other person. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.